I stood beside my son's cold grave when I realized my parents were not coming, and that silence cut deeper than the winter wind on my face. They had promised they would be there, yet their empty seats screamed louder than any cry I held back. Now a secret about his $1.5 million trust is clawing its way into my life, and I feel something dark moving behind every family smile. I am a mother who already lost everything, but I can feel another betrayal coming. Before I continue, tell me your country and the time right now, because what happens next will change how you see family forever. I stood beside my husband as the priest spoke soft words over my son's tiny white coffin, and every sound felt like it was cutting into my skin. The cold air pressed against my face, but it was nothing compared to the cold inside my chest. I kept my eyes on the small box that held my baby, because if I looked anywhere else, I felt like I would fall apart. My hands were shaking so badly that my husband had to hold them, and even his touch could not stop the pain. I kept checking my phone. I kept hoping to see my mother's name. Every second that passed felt louder than the church bells. People stood behind us, quiet and still, but 2 seats near the front were empty. Those seats were meant for my parents. They had promised they would be there. They had said they would hold me. Now they were not even sending a message. Their absence felt like another death, and it hurt almost as much as losing my son. The priest finished his words, and the coffin was slowly lowered into the ground. I felt my knees go weak. My son was really gone. I whispered his name, but no one answered me. My husband kissed my forehead, and I could feel his tears drop onto my hair. We were both breaking in the same silent way. After the service, people came to hug us. They said they were sorry. They said kind words. But all I could think about was my parents. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. It rang for a long time before she answered. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded flat, like she was talking about the weather and not about her grandson's funeral. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "why weren't you here?" She sighed like I was bothering her. "We had important matters to take care of," she said. "We could not come today." Important matters. That sentence burned inside me. What could be more important than my son? I asked, and my throat felt tight. She did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was cold. "You are too emotional right now. We will talk later." Then she hung up. I stared at my phone, and for a moment I thought I might throw it across the room. My husband looked at me with worry in his eyes. I could not even explain the hurt. It was too deep for words. We went home in silence. My house felt empty without my son's small sounds. His toys were still on the floor. His tiny shoes were by the door. Every step I took felt like I was walking through his memory. My heart felt like it was breaking all over again. That night, I could not sleep. I went into my son's bedroom and sat on his bed. The sheets still smelled like him. I held his favorite blanket against my chest, and tears fell onto it. I wanted to feel close to him, even if it was only through things he had touched. On his desk was a folder with his name on it. Inside were the papers for his trust. He had received it from a distant relative when he was born, and it was meant to be for his future. I had not looked at it in a long time, because it always made me think about everything he would never get to have now. But that night, I opened it, because I needed to feel like I was still taking care of him. As I read the pages, my hand started to shake. The amount was much larger than I remembered. There was more than $1 million in that account. My breath caught in my throat. I did not understand how it had grown so much. Then I saw a note attached to the last page. It said something about a future family decision that would decide how the money would be used if something happened to my son. I felt a cold wave move through my body. What family decision? I was his mother. I was the one who should decide. I remembered my parents again, not coming to the funeral, not answering my calls. A sick feeling grew in my stomach. I started to think about their sudden distance and their strange tone on the phone. It did not feel like just grief keeping them away. It felt like something else. I called my husband into the room. He sat next to me, and I showed him the papers. His eyes widened when he saw the amount and the note. "This is not right," he said quietly. "I know," I whispered. "Why would there be a family decision about his money?" We looked at each other, and fear filled the space between us. I started to think about how my parents had always favored my sister. They always gave her more. They always helped her first. A terrible thought came into my mind, and I did not want to believe it. But I could not push it away. What if they stayed away from the funeral because they were already thinking about his money? What if my son's death had become a chance for them to get rich? My chest felt tight as I imagined it. I felt sick. I wanted to call them and scream, but I knew I needed to be careful. If they were planning something, I had to know what it was. I sat there in my son's room, holding his papers, and I felt like a storm was forming around me. It was not just grief anymore. It was fear, and it was anger. I did not know what my parents were doing. But I knew it was not good. And I knew I was going to have to fight for my son, even now. I stared at the glowing screen without opening it, letting my fear rise and fall with every breath. My husband asked what was wrong, but I could not speak yet. My mind was racing, going back to every small moment when my parents had asked about the trust, about the future, about what would happen if something went wrong. I had brushed it off back then, thinking they were only being curious. Now those memories felt dark and sharp. I realized I had never really known what they were capable of. The room felt smaller, and even the walls seemed to listen. I could hear the clock ticking, loud and slow, like it was counting down to something terrible. I held my son's blanket tighter, as if it could protect me. Whatever my mother had written, I knew it would not be kind. I felt the first real wave of danger, and it told me that this fight was only starting now. As I closed the folder, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from my mother. My heart started to pound as I read it, because I could feel that whatever she was about to say would change everything. My phone rang early the next morning, cutting through the heavy silence that had filled the house since the funeral. I saw my mother's name and my stomach turned. When I answered, her voice was soft, almost sweet, but it felt fake in a way that made my skin crawl. She said the family needed to talk about my son's future, and hearing those words made me freeze. His future was gone. There was nothing left to talk about except his memory. When she mentioned his trust, my chest tightened like someone had pulled a rope around my heart and kept pulling. "Your sister is struggling," my mother said gently. "She needs a stable home, and your son would have wanted to help her." I felt sick hearing her use my child's name like that, as if he was just a tool for her plans. "He was a baby," I said, my voice shaking. "He did not even know what money was." She ignored that and kept talking about family duty and love. Every word felt like a lie wrapped in sugar. I could hear my father in the background, whispering something, and it made me feel even worse. "I am not giving you his money," I said, trying to sound strong. There was a pause on the line, then a small laugh. "Oh, you are just upset," my mother replied. "We will handle this when you calm down." It felt like my answer did not matter at all. It was as if they had already decided the money was theirs, and I was just a problem to manage. When the call ended, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I felt like I had just seen a dark side of her I had never noticed before. My husband found me sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. When I told him what she had said, his face hardened. "They sound too organized," he warned. "Too ready." His words made a chill move through me. It was like they had been waiting for this moment. I started to wonder how long they had been thinking about my son's trust. Had they been planning this even before he died? The thought made me feel sick. I could not stop imagining them talking behind my back, counting money while I was still crying. I opened my laptop with shaking hands and logged into the trust account. The numbers were still there, but something new caught my eye. There was a pending inquiry, one I did not recognize. My heart started to pound so loud I could hear it in my ears. Someone had tried to access the account without my permission. I felt a wave of panic rush through me. My son's money was not safe anymore. I called the bank, but they told me the request was still under review. They could not say who had made it. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying not to fall apart. This was not just talk anymore. This was real. Someone was trying to take what my son had left behind. My husband sat next to me and held my hand. "We will stop them," he said, but I could hear the worry in his voice. I wanted to believe him, but fear was already taking over my thoughts. My parents were not just asking. They were acting. I thought about every moment in my life when they had chosen my sister over me. Every gift, every favor, every excuse. Now they were doing it again, using my dead child as the reason. I felt anger rise in my chest, burning through the sadness. They had not even come to the funeral, yet they had time to make plans for his money. The unfairness of it made me feel dizzy. I wanted to call them and scream, but I knew that would only make things worse. I needed to be smart. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the pending inquiry, about my mother's soft voice, about the way she had brushed off my no. Nothing about it felt right. I imagined them walking into a bank, smiling and lying, just to get their hands on that money. I felt like my son was being attacked all over again. I sat up in bed and checked the account once more, hoping it would disappear. It was still there, waiting. I knew then that this was only the beginning of their attack. My phone buzzed again, and I jumped. This time it was a message from my sister. She said she was sorry for my loss, then added a line about how much a new home would change her life. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. They were all in on it. They were already counting on my son's money. I felt betrayed in a way I had never felt before. My family was turning against me, and I did not know how to stop it. As I put the phone down, I felt a mix of fear and determination settle inside me. They had made their first move, and it was quiet and sneaky. But I saw it now. I knew they were coming for everything my son had left behind. I did not know how far they would go, but I knew I had to protect his legacy with everything I had. The pending inquiry was still there, glowing on the screen, like a warning. Someone had tried to reach into my son's future, and I could feel that this fight was just starting. I drove to my parents' house with my hands locked around the steering wheel, my eyes burning from too many tears and too little sleep, and the whole way there I kept telling myself that maybe I was wrong, maybe there was some simple explanation for everything that felt so ugly, but deep down I already knew I was walking into something that would change how I saw my family forever. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed a moving truck parked on the street, and my stomach tightened before I even stepped out of the car. The front door was open, and voices floated out, light and busy, like nothing in the world had gone wrong. It felt wrong that they could sound so normal when my life had just been shattered. I walked inside slowly, and that was when I saw the boxes stacked neatly against the walls, labeled with my sister's name, and right there on the coffee table sat a thick folder with her name printed across the front beside a bright real estate logo. My heart dropped so hard it felt like it hit the floor. They were already preparing to buy her a house, already planning a new life with my son's money while I was still waking up every morning hoping this was all a nightmare. My mother turned when she saw me and smiled like nothing was wrong, like I had not just buried her grandson. "There you are," she said in that soft, sweet voice she used when she wanted something. My father barely looked up from his phone, and the way he avoided my eyes made my skin crawl. I stood there in the middle of their living room, surrounded by boxes and lies, feeling like I was invisible. "What is all this?" I asked, pointing at the folder, at the boxes, at the future they were building without me. My mother waved her hand as if I was asking about something small. "We are just talking about family support," she said. "About how we all need to help each other and share our blessings." The words sounded nice, but they felt empty, because not once did she say my son's name, not once did she look at me with anything close to care. It was like my child had been erased from their story, reduced to a number in a bank account. My sister came out of the hallway then, and when she saw me, her face went pale. Her eyes flicked to the folder on the table and then back to me, And in that one small moment I saw fear there, real fear, like she knew something she was not supposed to know. "Hi," she said weakly. I did not answer her. I was too busy trying not to fall apart. "How are you paying for a new house?" I asked, my voice tight and shaking. My father finally looked up, his jaw stiff. "That is not your concern," he said. "We are taking care of our daughter." My sister swallowed hard and whispered, "They said the trust was already approved." Those words hit me like a slap. "That is a lie," I said, turning to my parents. "I did not approve anything. I am the one who controls that account." My mother's smile slipped just for a second before she forced it back. "You must have forgotten," she said. "You were very emotional after the funeral." I stared at her, unable to believe how easily she could lie, how calmly she could try to rewrite reality right in front of me. "Show me the papers," I said. My father stood up fast, knocking his chair back. "You do not need to see anything," he snapped. "This is family business." I felt something inside me crack. "I am his mother," I said, my voice breaking. "That money belongs to my son, not to you, not to her, not to anyone else." My mother stepped closer, her eyes cold now, the soft mask gone. "You are being selfish," she said. "Your sister needs this. Do not ruin it for her." I looked at my sister, who was crying quietly now, and all I could think was how my own pain meant nothing to them, how my child's life had become nothing more than a way to buy someone else a dream. I grabbed my bag, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold on to it, and turned toward the door. I could not stay there another second. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, filled with lies and plans that did not include my son or my grief. As I walked out, I heard my mother call my name, but I did not stop. I drove away with tears blurring my vision, knowing that something terrible was happening behind those old smiles, something that was stealing what little my son had left behind. I did not have proof yet, but I knew it in my bones. Documents were being falsified, stories were being twisted, and my own family was at the center of it all, and as I pulled over on the side of the road to catch my breath, I realized that if I did not fight back soon, they would take everything, and I would never forgive myself for letting them erase my child like this. I sat in the small lawyer's office with my hands folded in my lap, staring at the worn carpet while the smell of old books and stale coffee filled the air. The room felt heavy, like it was holding too many secrets. My heart was still racing from everything that had happened at my parents' house, and when I finally started talking, the words came out in a rush. I told him about the funeral, about the empty seats, about the boxes, the real estate folder, and the way my mother had looked at me when I asked about the trust. My voice shook as I spoke, and more than once I had to stop because tears were burning in my eyes. This was not just about money. It was about my son, about how even in death he was being used and erased by the people who were supposed to love him. The lawyer listened quietly, his face serious, and then he turned to his computer and pulled up the trust records. The clicking of the keyboard sounded loud in the small room. When the documents appeared on the screen, he leaned forward and frowned. "These signatures," he said slowly, pointing at the page, "they do not match yours." I leaned closer, my heart pounding. I knew my own signature. I had signed enough forms in my life to recognize it instantly, and what I was seeing was wrong. The curves were off. The pressure was different. Someone had tried to copy my name, and they had done a bad job of it. Someone already tried to move the money, the lawyer said. And it was not subtle. Hearing that made my stomach twist. They had not just talked about it. They had acted. Every forged line on that page felt like another slap from my own family. I felt sick looking at it. I remembered how my mother used to help me sign school forms when I was a child, guiding my hand, teaching me how to write my name neatly. She had always been proud of how good she was at writing. Now that same skill was being used to steal from me, to steal from my son. The betrayal hurt in a way I could not put into words. It was like she had taken something small and loving from my past and turned it into a weapon against me. The lawyer looked at me and said we could stop it, but only if I acted fast. They are trying to move this money quietly, he warned. If they succeed, getting it back will be much harder. Fear washed over me. I thought about how close they already were to taking everything. I nodded, even though my hands were shaking. What do I need to do? I asked. He told me to start collecting every piece of evidence I had. Messages. Calls. Emails. Anything that showed what they were trying to do. I left his office feeling both scared and strangely stronger. For the first time, someone had taken me seriously. When I got home, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my father. Stop being difficult, it said. You are making this harder than it needs to be. I stared at the screen, and something inside me went cold. That was all I was to them now. Not a mother who had just lost her child. Not a daughter who was in pain. Just a problem. An obstacle in their way. That realization hurt almost as much as everything else. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. My husband sat across from me, worry in his eyes, but I could tell he was proud of me for taking this step. I started going through my phone, scrolling back through messages from my parents and my sister. I saved every one that mentioned the trust, the house, or anything that sounded like a plan. Some of them were subtle, almost innocent, but now I could see the pattern. They had been asking about the money for months. They had been setting this up long before my son was gone. I checked my call history and took screenshots of every call from them after the funeral. I printed out bank records, emails, and anything else I could find. It felt strange, turning my own family into evidence, but I knew I had no choice. They had crossed a line that could not be undone. I was not just protecting money. I was protecting my son's last gift, his last piece of this world. As I worked, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. She wrote about how the family was worried about me, how they just wanted what was best for everyone. I could almost hear her soft, fake voice as I read it. I saved it too. Every lie, every twist of the truth, was going into my growing file. I was building a case, piece by piece, against the people who raised me. The more I collected, the clearer it became. They had planned this. The way they talked, the way they moved so fast after the funeral, the way they tried to push me aside. It was all there in black and white now. I felt a strange mix of anger and sadness. I did not want to fight my own parents, but they had left me no choice. They were trying to steal from my dead child, and I would never forgive myself if I let them. By the time the sun went down, my table was covered in papers. My head hurt from reading so much, but my heart felt steady for the first time in days. I was not helpless anymore. I had proof starting to form. I had a path forward. But deep down, I knew this was not over. My parents would not give up so easily. They had already shown how far they were willing to go, and something told me their next move would be even bigger. I looked at my phone, waiting for it to light up again, because I could feel that another storm was coming, and I did not know if I was ready for what they would try next. The knock on my front door came just after noon, sharp and loud, and something in my chest told me it was not going to bring anything good. I was still sitting at the kitchen table with stacks of printed emails and bank records spread in front of me when I heard it, and for a moment I just stared at the door, hoping I was wrong. Then I heard my mother's voice through the wood, tight and impatient, calling my name. My heart started to pound. I did not want to see them, but I knew hiding would only give them more power. When I opened the door, my parents stood there with hard faces and stiff bodies, like they had already decided I was their enemy. There was no softness in their eyes, no sign of the people who once held me when I cried. They looked like strangers who had come to collect something that belonged to them. "We need to talk," my father said as he stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. My mother followed, her lips pressed together in a thin line. I felt small standing there in my own hallway, but I forced myself not to move. "You are embarrassing this family," my mother said, her voice sharp. "Running to a lawyer like this. People are starting to talk." I could not believe what I was hearing. My son was dead, and all she cared about was what people thought of her. "Your sister needs that house," my father added. "She cannot wait while you play these games." Every word felt like a slap. They were not asking. They were demanding. I looked at them and felt something inside me break. "You are talking about my son's money," I said quietly. "My child is gone, and you are already spending what he left behind." My mother crossed her arms. "You are being selfish," she snapped. "You always have been. You think everything is about you." Those words cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. I had buried my own child. I had cried myself to sleep every night. And she was calling me selfish. I felt tears burn in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. "You will not touch a single dollar of his trust," I said, my voice shaking with fear and anger. "Not one." My father laughed, a cold sound that did not belong to him. "You do not get to decide that," he said. "We have rights too." My mother stepped closer to me, her face inches from mine. "We will take you to court if we have to," she whispered. "You cannot stop this." I felt my whole body start to shake, but I did not step back. "You can threaten me all you want," I said. "I will protect my son." For a moment, none of us spoke. The air felt thick, heavy with everything that had been said and everything that was still coming. Then my parents turned and walked out. They did not say goodbye. They did not look back. When the door closed behind them, the house felt suddenly very quiet. I slid down the wall and collapsed on the floor, my knees weak, my heart racing. My husband ran to me, holding me as I finally let the tears fall. This fight was no longer quiet or polite. It was out in the open now, ugly and loud. My own family was willing to destroy me to get what they wanted. And deep down, I knew they were already preparing their next move, something even worse than words at my door. The legal papers arrived in a thick white envelope that felt heavier than it should have, and the moment I saw my parents' names printed across the top, my chest tightened. I opened it with shaking hands, and as I read each page, it felt like being punched again and again. They were accusing me of misusing my son's trust, of hiding money, of acting against the family. Every word was a lie, twisted and cold, written to make me look like a greedy woman instead of a grieving mother. I felt sick as I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at sentences that painted me as someone I was not. But beneath that sickness, I felt something else too, something new. I felt anger turning into strength. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. My husband sat beside me as I read the papers out loud, and I could see his jaw tighten with every lie. "They are trying to flip the story," he said. "They want to make you the bad one." I nodded slowly, folding the pages back into the envelope. "They think I will be too broken to stand up," I said. "But they are wrong." Even as fear ran through me, I knew I could not back down now. My son's memory was already being dragged through the dirt by their greed. I would not let them win. The day of the first hearing came too fast. I stood in front of the courthouse, feeling small under the tall stone walls, and for a moment I thought about turning around and running. But then I thought about my son, about his small hands, his soft laugh, and I walked inside. The courtroom was cold and quiet, and when my parents walked in, it felt like all the air was sucked out of the room. My mother wore black and clutched a tissue like she was already preparing to cry. My sister stayed close to her, holding her arm, her face full of worry that looked almost real. When the judge entered, everyone stood, and I felt my heart pounding in my ears. My parents' lawyer started first, talking about family unity and how I was keeping money away from people who needed it. My mother dabbed at her eyes, letting fake tears fall, and it made my stomach turn. They never once said my son's name. Not once did they speak about the child whose life had created this trust in the first place. It was like he did not matter at all. I sat there, my hands clenched together, trying not to scream. When it was my turn, I stood up and walked to the front, my legs shaking but my voice steady. I handed over the documents I had collected, every message, every bank record, every lie they had told. The judge looked through them slowly, his face unreadable. For the first time, I saw something change in his eyes. Doubt. My parents shifted in their seats, and my mother stopped crying. The room felt tense, like it was holding its breath. I could feel hope rising in me, small but real. Still, the case was not over. The judge said he needed more time, more proof. He set another date, one that felt too far away. As I left the courtroom, my heart was still racing. If I lost, my son's money would disappear into their hands forever. All of it, gone, turned into a house and a life that had nothing to do with him. I walked out into the sunlight, feeling both strong and terrified. The next hearing would decide everything, and I did not know if I had enough to win. Outside, my mother called my name, her voice suddenly sweet again. I turned and saw her standing there with my sister, their faces tight. "You do not have to do this," she said. "We can settle this like a family." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "You stopped being my family when you tried to steal from my son," I said. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she said nothing as I walked past her. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the judge's words, about the need for one final piece of proof. I had given him everything I had, but it was not enough yet. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of time pressing down on me. Somewhere, my parents were planning their next move, and I knew it would not be kind. They would not give up easily. They had already shown how far they were willing to go. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old emails and messages again, searching for something I might have missed. My heart pounded with every new line I read. The judge had asked for one final piece of proof, and I did not know if I could get it in time. I stayed up all night, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open and piles of paper around me, refusing to let my eyes close even when they burned. The house was quiet, but my mind was loud with fear and worry. I kept thinking about the judge's words, about how one final piece of proof could decide everything. I went through old emails, old bank statements, and every message I had saved. My fingers moved fast across the keyboard, scrolling, clicking, searching, like my life depended on it, because in many ways it did. Every time I thought I had reached the end, I went back again, just in case I had missed something. Then I saw it. A single email from my mother, sent to a bank officer weeks before my son died. My heart started to pound so hard I could feel it in my throat. In the message, she was clearly asking how to release the trust without my consent. She wrote about family authority and special circumstances, trying to find a way around me. My hands trembled as I read it again and again. This was it. This was the truth. It was not just a mistake or a misunderstanding. They had planned this. They had been trying to take my son's money long before he was gone. I printed the email along with the bank's reply, and stared at the pages as if they might disappear. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they were not just from pain. They were from relief. I finally had something real, something that could not be twisted or explained away. I sent everything to my lawyer and waited, my heart racing, until he called back. "This changes everything," he said. "Bring it to court." The next hearing felt even heavier than the first. I walked into the courtroom with a folder pressed to my chest, feeling like I was carrying my son's last chance. My parents sat on the other side, looking confident, like they thought they still had control. My mother even smiled at me, a small, fake smile that made my skin crawl. But I did not look away. I held my ground, knowing what I had in my hands. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and handed the judge the email and the bank reply. The room went silent as he read. You could hear the pages move. My parents' faces slowly drained of color. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father stared at the table, his jaw tight. For the first time since this nightmare began, they looked afraid. Their lives were falling apart right in front of everyone. The judge looked up, his eyes hard. He spoke about fraud, about unethical behavior, about how wrong it was to try to steal from a child's trust. Every word felt like a small piece of justice. I felt a weight lift from my chest, a pressure I had been carrying since the day of the funeral. My son was finally being seen, finally being protected by someone in power. But the judge was not finished. He said there was still one more decision to be made, about what would happen to my parents because of what they had done. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, holding my breath. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. This was the moment that would decide their fate. I did not know if the court would go easy on them or hold them fully responsible. I did not know how far the justice would go. All I knew was that my son deserved the truth, and at last, it was out in the open, shining a light on everything they had tried to hide. The courtroom felt so quiet that I could hear my own breathing when the judge prepared to speak. Everyone was standing, and it felt like the whole room was holding its breath, waiting for words that would change all our lives. My parents sat stiff in their seats, their faces tight and pale, while my sister stared at the floor. I held my hands together, my heart pounding, thinking about my son and everything I had fought for. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm, and every word landed like a heavy stone. He ordered my parents to stay away from the trust, making it clear they had no right to touch it now or ever. He warned them that if they tried again, there would be serious consequences. Hearing that felt like a wave of relief washing over me. My son's money was safe. My sister let out a small sound, almost like a sob, and I saw her shoulders start to shake. She knew in that moment that her dream house was never going to happen. All the plans, all the boxes, all the promises my parents had made her were gone. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part of me remembered how she had stood there in my parents' living room and told me the trust was approved. She had been part of this, even if she was now crying about it. My mother stared straight ahead, her face hard, and my father clenched his fists. They did not look at me. They did not say a word. It was over. As people began to move and whisper, I stayed in my seat for a moment, letting the truth sink in. I had won, but it did not feel like a celebration. It felt heavy. I felt relief, yes, but also deep sadness. Nothing could bring my son back. Nothing could erase the way my family had turned on me. The money was safe, but the damage they had done was real and lasting. I had lost more than I ever expected in this fight. When I finally stood and walked toward the exit, my legs felt weak, but my heart felt strong. I passed my parents without looking at them. I did not need to see their faces to know what they had lost. Outside the courtroom, the sunlight felt strange, like I was stepping into a different world. I had chosen my child over blood, and I would never regret that. Protecting my son, even after his death, was the most important thing I would ever do. Still, as I walked away, I knew there was one last emotional wound to face. I was free from their control now, free from their lies and their greed, but I was not free from the pain they had caused. I had to decide what kind of future I wanted without them, what kind of life I would build now that my family was broken. The fight was over, but the healing had not even begun, and I did not know if my heart was ready for what came next. In the weeks after the courtroom fell silent, I found myself sitting alone in my son's room more than anywhere else. I would hold his small blanket and breathe in what was left of his scent, and for the first time since everything began, I did not feel like I was drowning. The fight was over. The lies were exposed. His trust was safe. But my heart was still hurting in a way no judge could fix. I let myself cry without fear now, because I no longer had to be strong for a battle. I could be strong for healing. I stopped answering my parents' calls. At first it hurt, like I was cutting off a piece of myself, but with every day that passed, the pain felt lighter. I began to understand that love is not proven by blood or words. It is proven by who shows up when everything is falling apart. They did not show up for my son. They did not show up for me. And that truth gave me the courage to let them go. I started making small changes in my home. I cleaned out the boxes they had touched. I put my son's photos on the walls. I turned his room into a place of peace instead of grief. Every step felt like I was reclaiming something they had tried to take from me, not just his money, but my dignity as his mother. The trust was no longer just a bank account. It was a symbol of his life, of his future, of the love that would never fade. Sometimes I still think about what my family did, and it hurts. But it no longer controls me. I chose peace over revenge, and in that choice, I found a strength I did not know I had. Losing my son changed me forever, but almost losing his legacy showed me who I really was. I was not weak. I was a mother who fought for her child, even when he was no longer here to hold my hand. Now when I look forward, I see a life built on truth, not lies. On love, not greed. My heart is still broken, but it is also brave. And as I walk into whatever comes next, I know one thing for sure. I lost my child, but I never let anyone steal his worth, and that is a victory no one can ever take away from me.